dishonesty, disrespectful, discrimination, detached, dismissive. That's it. I'm done. Relationships can be messy. Are you having trouble with your personal or professional relationship? Not to worry. As a relationship therapist and coach for over 25 years, I have a lot to share, and so will my guest experts. Let's get smarter in our business and personal lives so we can be our best selves. Now, let's get on with the show. Hello, welcome back to the Luella Young Show. And today, for those of you who've been struggling with parenting, which is a big part of, I think, well, most women's lives now because of being pulled in so many different directions every single day, I think you're going to appreciate this. I have with me today a very special guest, and I feel very privileged that she's on the show today. Her name is Erica Komisar. And she's a social worker, a psychoanalyst, and a parent guidance expert who has been in private practice in New York City for over 30 years. And Eric, among many other things that Erica is doing and has done, she has also written 2 books. I don't know how you do this, but anyway, the titles are Being There, Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years Matters, which is going to be, I think, mostly what we're going to speak about today. And the other one is called Chicken Little, The Sky Isn't Falling, Raising Resilient Adolescents in the New Age of Anxiety, which is super important. And she's also a contributor to the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the New York Daily News. So welcome, Erica.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Okay, so I want you to start off by just letting our listeners know what you found in the research that you have done. What are the most important things for us to know in the research? Let's just start off by...
Sure. Yeah. Well, the reason I wrote Being There was because there was a rise in mental illness in children and adolescents. And what I was seeing in my practice is that the children who were doing the least well were the children whose primary attachment figures, usually their mothers, were either absent physically and or emotionally for those children. And so I started looking at the research, the neuroscience research, the epigenetics research, and the attachment research, and found that what I was seeing in my practice was backed up with a great deal of research, some of it very recent at the time that I wrote the book, neuroscience research, to show that a primary attachment figure, what we call attachment security, is critical to the future mental health of children, and that our children cannot develop that feeling of safety and security, what we call attachment security, in the first 3 years if they don't have their go-to person, the person who makes them feel safe and secure in the world, physically and emotionally present most of the time for them. And that 85% of a child's right brain, or you'd say the part of them that is responsible for things like emotional regulation and coping with adversity in the future and the feeling of trusting relationships and feeling safe in the world, that as the foundation of their personality is set in the first 3 years through the presence of that primary attachment figure. So what the outcome of the book was that, basically the bottom line is mothers or primary attachment figures, usually the mother, are responsible for that attachment security in the first 3 years that lays down the foundation for mental health and a feeling of security in the future. So what we call resilience today is not something people are born with. Children are not born resilient. You have to create that foundation of resilience, but that means providing them with your physical and emotional presence as much as possible in that first 3 years.
Okay, so resilience. Okay. To me also, I wonder if there's a bit of a contradictory, principle here in a sense, because I think what you're saying is that it's very important for the primary caregiver, and let's just say a woman, okay? Because
It
normally?
usually is.
Yeah.
It usually is. The primary attachment figure, I wouldn't say caregiver, I would say primary
Okay.
attachment figure, but yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, if she is around more in the first 3 years, and I'm going to ask you why 3 years later on,
Yep.
but in the first 3 years of the child's life, how does that build resilience into the child? Because couldn't like in some ways too be like if because I've worked with many women as well that I find are overly almost you could say attached to their children, and it's sort of like that helicopter type of mother that is always around them and kind of guiding them constantly. So how does that build resilience in a child whose mother is doing everything for them, right? And helping them cope with their emotions constantly rather than the child learning how to do that a little bit on their own?
No, children can't cope with their emotions on their own in the first 3 years, but helicopter parenting is a different thing. That's anxious parenting.
Yeah.
Usually people who are helicopter parents have attachment disorders of their own.
Yeah.
They usually suffer from ambivalent attachment disorders. So, but children can't cope with their emotions in the first 3 years on their own. So think about the fact that children are more resilient if you help to develop that foundation of not only them feeling safe and secure, but you serve as the emotional digestive system for them in the first 3 years. And the truth is that you serve as the emotional digestive system for them uh, for the first 25 years.
Yeah.
Because what we know is that the right brain isn't fully developed. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the right brain that we know doesn't finish its development till about 25 years of age. And in that period, the balancing part of the brain, you'd say the thing that balances impulsivity, that balances desires with rational thinking, the part of them, the executive functioning, the emotional regulation parts, they're not finish developing those parts of their brain until they're 25. But the thing is, in most families, children leave home at 18, right? So we have about 18 years because from 18 to 25, we can still do it. But generally, we do it from afar. Depends on where you live and if your children live at home with you. But for the most part, children go to university and we're helping them to regulate their emotions from afar. Definitely through the first 18 years and even after. Parents are providing a function for their children. It's a biological function. It's a brain function. Think about the fact that your children's brains aren't fully developed and you're providing that function for them. It's
Yeah.
like the fourth leg of the table for the first 25 years. And parents don't want to hear that because it puts a lot of responsibility on them, but they have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the first 3 years, if you're not helping to regulate your children, so let me talk about what regulation means.
Yeah, let's give it listeners an
because
example.
it feels like such a cold term and
Yeah.
a technical term. When a baby cries in the first 3 years, it's called distress. And if we meet that distress with sensitive empathic nurturing, meaning if we respond to their distress with sensitivity, skin to skin contact, eye contact, a soothing tone of voice, loving, affectionate, physical and emotional presence for that baby, we bring a baby's emotions back to what we call homeostasis. It sounds all technical, but our emotions, when we're born, they're like sailing in the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah. And what mothers do from moment to moment when they soothe the baby in distress is they bring the baby's emotions back to homeostasis. That's not a flat line. That's more like sailing in the Caribbean. So every time a baby is in distress, they're seeking their go-to person. You are, as their primary attachment figure, the center of their universe. Without you present, they feel lost. They feel frightened. They feel unsafe. And so it's that soothing the distress from moment to moment in the first 3 years that helps babies to regulate their emotions going forward. It's not until 3 years of age that they can begin to internalize the ability to do it on their own. So helicopter parenting is a different thing. Helicopter parenting is anxious parenting, not healthy parenting, because what we know is that babies need healthy, secure attachment. They also need healthy separation. And separation begins at about 8 months. 8 months for babies is when they realize that their mothers could leave and not come back. Because until 8 months, they're in a kind of state of merger with the mother, where they feel that the mother is a narcissistic extension of themselves. So when their diapers changed, they made it happen. When they get fed and the breast comes into their mouth, they made it happen, right? Their cries were responded to, but they don't see the mother as a separate person. At about 8 months, they realize the mother is separate and they go, oh, darn, now my mother could leave and not come back. So from 8 months till about 18 or 20 months is what we call separation anxiety, when they are the most terrified of losing contact with their go-to person. And babies become very clingy and they need their mothers even more. So, and this is when mothers have left them and gone back to work and and put them in daycare. So for me, this is like a critical thing for mothers to know, that they're even more frightened in that period, that you're not there, right? At 18 months, they start to explore their independence. They feel a little more secure and they start to want to toddle. That's why we call it toddling. They want to toddle off and kind of play and explore their independence a little. But they still need the presence of their mothers, because they do something called emotional refueling, something Margaret Mahler called rapprochement, which is they look back at the mother, or they toddle back to get a hug from the mother to reassure them as their touchstone of security, and then toddle off again. It's that repetition of the security, that by 3 years of age, they know that their mother is there for them, and they internalize the feeling that even when she's not there, she's with them.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're not present in those first 3 years, they don't either develop that attachment security or are allowed to do that refueling. Instead, they develop pathological defenses, often attachment disorders, which help them to cope with your absence, either physically or emotionally or both. But they are fragile defenses. And those defenses give way at some point because they are just barely holding the baby together. So the baby will either will go into fight or flight. The baby will either go into fight mode, which is have behavioral issues and show signs of aggression. When they get to preschool and school age, they'll go into flight mode, which is they'll develop distractibility, which is why so many kids are developing ADH. I'm not going to call it ADHD because it's not a disorder. It's not a disorder. I don't care what anybody says. It is a stress response. There are certain children who have more sensitivity to stress than others. We know this. There's a genetic marker for it. Sensitivity to stress. And those children go into flight and to fight more easily than other children.
Okay, yeah. So it's more of a societal problem, ADHD, in terms of the constant distractions.
It's a stress response. So then the next question should be in society, how are we stressing out such young children? And the answer is it's the way we raise them. It's our self-preoccupation. We have a self-orientation today that is stressing out our children. We are either preoccupied with our own interests, our own employment, our own preoccupations, or we are home with them, but distracted on our devices or with our own, sort of whatever our own interests are. But the idea is that very young children need their parents to be preoccupied with them.
They need their parents' attention or the primary caregiver's attention, whatever that might be. Okay, so I guess I agree with everything you're saying. My question, my fear almost, and hearing the first 3 years, my fear is putting on guilt on women that are already feeling incredibly guilty. Because it's not like in Canada, it's 1 year of parental
leave.
Thank you. Yeah. Other countries, it's different. In the States, is it still only 6 weeks or something?
No,
crazy?
nothing. We have nothing. Nothing. Not a zip, nothing.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's insanity.
Insanity. I was in the Senate a month ago speaking to Republican senators about why we need some kind of paid leave, that even if it's creatively introduced. I don't care at this point. I mean, I want it to be paid leave just as it is in other countries to our taxes, but I'll take it any way we can get it, to be honest, to give women choices. Okay. But that doesn't, so guilt for me is not a bad emotion. Here's the thing. Guilt is a signal feeling. If we ignore pain, distress, guilt, then we're ignoring something in our brain that is telling us we're in conflict. There's something in us that's in conflict internally. And we do not want to, any more than if you break your ankle. You don't want to keep walking on your ankle. You want to go see a doctor because you know the pain is telling you there's something wrong, right? So we don't want guilt to go away because guilt means our conscience is working. It means our instincts are working. So when we want guilt to go away, we want the part of us that distinguishes what's right or wrong for us to go away.
Yeah. No,
so guilt is it's a signal feeling that you're in conflict. Now, you may not have, every woman might not have the same choices. You might have a single mother who is raising her children on her own, who has to work. You know what? Even for that mother, the guilt is helpful. I'll tell you why. Because she then goes, maybe she talks to her therapist, maybe she talks to her family members, and she has to grapple with her conflicts, which will help her to make better choices. You know, when we turn away from conflicts or suppress them or repress them, even worse, nothing good comes of that. And I don't need to quote Freud to say, nothing good comes of repressing our internal conflicts, right? So we have to deal with them. Now, what would that mother who's a single mother decide? She might choose to use a single surrogate caregiver, a babysitter, instead of daycare. She might choose, if she can't afford that, to share a single surrogate caregiver with another family. That would be better than daycare. She might choose to go live with her family, even if they're, pains in the patootie. She might choose to go and live with them, or live next door to them, or live next door to her sister so they can share the care. But she might not go out at night after she comes home. She might come home at 5 o'clock from her housekeeping job, and she might not go out again.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll say every woman has choices. They don't all have the same choices. But if we flush our guilt down the toilet, if we say it's not a good feeling, then there is nothing drawing us empathically towards our children's distress.
Agreed. Like I always, even when I counsel my clients, I say guilt is meant to be a short-term emotion. Like I always think the child putting their hand in the cookie jar. Okay, guilt, I've learned the lesson. Now let's make better choices, right? And so same with women, I guess you're saying. It's sort of like notice it, feel it, and then act on it. Make a different, but yeah, so I think that's very important though. It's not like, I guess my fear when I say guilt, I shouldn't have used guilt. I probably should have used the word self-care. Like I'm a little bit worried because, to be honest with you, like I think for many, I hate to put it this way, but not all women are meant to be or are great mothers, and so sometimes I wonder, maybe there's another caregiver. Maybe, I mean, if ideally the father, but what if there is another like soul, like maybe an aunt, or maybe like you say, like a sole caregiver, like a babysitter down the street or something like that. Like, I mean, so the person can go to her job and feel confident that, I've chosen very carefully this other caregiver of mine. And then so when she comes home at the end of the day, she can put all her love, into the child. Like I just like I worry about women feeling, that they can't have a career in those first 3 years.
So my book was called Being There. It was a book about prioritizing children. There are some women who have to work, and there are some women who love to work. In the end, there's going to be loss for that child and for those mothers if they don't grapple with the gravitas of leaving a child in those years. And I think as a society, we have not grappled with the gravitas of leaving a child in those early years. And we have coddled women to be perfectly honest, we've coddled women. And, my friend Jonathan Haidt has a book called The Coddling of the American Mind about children being coddled. But in truth, we've coddled women over the last 75 years by telling them, you can raise healthy children and be away all day long and put them in daycare and have somebody else raise them. Now, I don't give up on mothers so easily. I fight for mothers to be the best mothers they can be. So when mothers say, I'm not a good mother, I say, have you tried to get help? Before you give up on yourself and give up on mothering, have you reached out for help to deal with the losses in your own past that would make you feel so detached from your own child? Because in truth, when we're bored or detached from other people's children, unless you're in my field where you love all babies because it's your profession. I mean, you say it's your passion, but not all women are like that. Not all men are like that. So instinctually, we are more bored with other people's children, but it is not instinctual to be bored with your own children. It is not instinctual. So that means that there are losses there. So before I'll write off a mother, I say that mothers should be getting help, right? The help that they need to be the best mother they can be. Now, if a mother says, right, I have so much loss, so much trauma that I cannot be with my baby, but again, I don't give up on mothers easily. So this idea that we have, skiing in Canada, I know skiing is a big deal. So the idea of having beginning binding settings on ski boots, so as soon as you hit a bump, the skis pop off. I think we've made it too easy for women to have their skis pop off.
Yeah, no, I definitely see, and this is why I love this conversation, because there's so many different perspectives, because I think, also, I mean, just because you decide to stay home with that child for 3 years doesn't mean that you are going to be the best caregiver ever for that child, right? There's a lot of negligent, I mean, look at the phone, like that's really saddens me. I know we're of similar age from another podcast and I mean, I'm just so thankful. I never had a phone when I was at a playground with my kids, right? And so it's like, which kind of, brings me to the quality time. And I know I've heard you say on other podcasts that it's quantity, it's not quality.
No, it's both. It's both.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
both.
Good.
No, I don't
Good.
say that. I say that quality is a ruse because you need a quantity of time where you're also quality and with them emotionally. So that's what. So the concept is that there is work that women can do when they're raising young children, that they can do part-time, flexibly, have control over it, do it so they can prioritize the needs of their children over their work. The problem is that women have been told they can do all kinds of work. And the truth is, when you're raising young children, there are certain kinds of work, and this is the inconvenient truth, that do not give you the control and the flexibility that you need to raise young children, right?
True, and I'll share something with you. Just before this, we stepped on to here together, I was with two women lawyers, and we're trying to create a support group for female lawyers. And we're going to touch on various topics, but this is the one thing that women lawyers are asking for. And I feel privileged to be belonging to this group is that, how do we create this balance? And then the different forms or areas of law, right? Like a defense attorney versus maybe commercial.
I can use an example of one of my dearest friends who's a lawyer who worked in a big law firm in New York, where they worked them like crazy. When she had children, she quit and she took a few clients and just said, I'm just going to have my own little practice out of my home, and I'm going to have these 3 clients. And she was able to prioritize her children. Now, her salary went down from, I don't know, this was many years ago. So maybe it was $1,050,000 or $175,000 because she had to hire an assistant. So she had the flexibility, maybe, And so in the years that she was raising young children, she made money, but she didn't make a lot of money, and it
Right.
wasn't a priority of hers.
Yeah.
And so you can do it, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is what I mean by coddling women. We have
Mm-hmm.
coddled women to say, you do not have to make any sacrifices at all.
Mm-hmm.
No sacrifices to your career, no sacrifices to the money, no
Mm-hmm.
sacrifices to the material success, no sacrifices to your time. And we lie to women because you cannot raise healthy children unless you can sacrifice.
100%. Life and marriage, everything's about sacrifice.
Everything.
100%
And that's why we
agree.
have a 50% divorce rate.
Yeah.
And that's why we have children that are with a rising mental health crisis epidemic in this world,
Mm-hmm.
because people are no longer willing to really value what's important.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's ski bindings are set on beginner.
Yeah. Yes. Like, yeah, here's the parachute. If in case you want to jump out at any. No, I work with a lot of couples as well, Erica, and I find the big problem really comes down to commitment. You know, I get not all marriages are perfect, but I think the same analogy can be used with marriages. It's just
Yeah.
way too easy right now to.
It's discomfort with discomfort.
Yes, 100%.
It's not
yeah.
being able to cope with discomfort, with conflict, with
Mhm.
frustration,
Yeah.
with pain of any kind. And so the default is to leave. So women, they get bored with their babies. Now, boredom is a sign of postpartum depression. When you're dying to run back to work, that should be examined, not encouraged.
Which I'm glad you brought that up, because see, like I've been thinking a lot about this. Like I was raised on a farm, and I really feel for my mother, who's like a mother of 9 children. My mother, even my oldest sister, who's 10 years older than me, like I had my children in the city here, and I know I craved, like I would dress them up in the middle of winter, and we would just go to the mall. Like we would just walk around in Walmart because I needed that stimulation of.
Because that's not the way women are supposed to raise children, in isolation in a modern world. We're supposed to live in multi-generational housing.
Yes.
We're supposed to live amongst other women who are raising children too.
Yeah.
And so, what you're talking about is all part of this societal pressure to leave your children behind and go out into the workforce as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is it leaves a desert. It leaves a desert for women. So I started an organization called Attachment Circles, which is going to be fully up and running. It's already, the website's up and running, but it's going to be fully up and running as of June 1st. And it's because I woke up one morning and said, I'm so tired of hearing women. It breaks my heart say that there are no other women to form support groups or play groups with their children with.
Yeah.
That all women, 80%, 90% are out in the workforce. And so the women who are choosing to raise their children have no one to support them.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a way for women to form grassroots in their communities, play groups with other women and men, if the men are the primary attachment figures, who are raising their children, right? Oh. And so who are prioritizing their children, because the idea is you can still be working part-time, but you're spending the majority of your time still raising your children. And those parents are having trouble finding other parents. We were never meant to raise children in isolation. We were meant to raise children in communities of like-minded people. Yeah.
100%. I mean, we can go back to the African tribes and, or even the Hutterite communities or the Amish in the US. Like, I mean, as much as I think we would love to criticize those communities and think of it as, odd or whatever, I mean, it makes so much sense. Like I was thinking about it the other day, like it's just makes so much sense. So, okay, how about, like, when I think of it too, like, my mother, like, I don't remember her spending a lot of one-on-one time with me. Like, I honestly don't, because the poor woman, like, I mean,
9 children.
No, 9. Exactly.
Children end up raising children with 9 children. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's sort of like I think a lot of us could probably relate with this too. Like our immigrant parents were like the work ethic was just so stressed so much, right? Because they came to another country and it was all about trying to get ahead and working hard. So I find, you know, like you say, you can't do everything, but one thing my mom was always home. She was always home. So I guess, like you say, that attachment, I always knew she was around the corner doing the
That's
wash
right. I was
or,
going to say, that's right. Within reach. So if you fell down and scraped your knee and you cried, you knew your
right.
mother would come. You knew you could go to her and get a hug. So, I mean, the idea is that the anxious mother is hovering on top of her baby,
Yeah.
needing to, like, with her eyeballs like this.
Yes.
That's not what healthy attachment is about.
No.
Healthy attachment is a dance. It's a dance of, first of all, your children want to know that you're interested in them more than anything else. And the
Hmm.
problem is, we're interested in our work more than our children. We're interested in our phones and our computers more than our children. We're interested in ourselves more than our children.
Yeah.
So, the idea that your primary interest has to be your children. So
Yeah.
call it prioritizing them is how they feel, how they develop a sense of self-esteem, right?
Yeah.
If you're not interested in them, why should they be interested in themselves?
Right.
It
Right.
just is logical.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't mean you're with them every second. If you're home, you're cooking soup, you're
Yes.
making the bed, you're doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And so, but you are still prioritizing during the day, playing with, getting on the
Yeah.
floor, doing floor, what we call floor time with babies,
Yeah.
taking them out to the park,
Hmm.
engaging them, interacting with them, making cookies with them. But
Right.
you're not doing that every single second, because children also have to learn how to sit on the floor and play with their own toys. But they'll be playing with their own toys while you're making soup, and they'll look up to you, and 50% of the time they'll catch your eye, and
Hmm.
50% they won't, and they'll cry. And then
Hmm.
you'll come down and greet them. But
Hmm.
50% of the time you'll check your baby out while you're making soup and smile at them. And, so there's an interaction that happens with mothers and babies throughout the day, which isn't like, it's not
No.
like that. It's a dance of attachment and separation, and attachment and separation. It's throughout the day, right? But the
Yeah.
first year in most parts of the world, mothers wear their babies on their bodies. That baby wearing is skin to skin contact. There was a researcher from Columbia who said that mothers are the central nervous system to babies in the first year, that they are born so neurologically fragile and too early, to be frank.
Mm.
There are theories that say they're born 9 months too early. And when they come out, they only come out when they come out because their heads are too big to go through the birth canal later. Right?
Oh
Our
boy.
heads were so big evolutionarily that they had to be born when they're born. But then they're meant to be almost like marsupials, worn on our body for the first year, first on the front, then on the back in most parts of the world. That provides a feeling of safety and security for children in that first year. So then going into the second and third year, it allows them to have a little more of that back and forth and a little more independence in your presence, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. Okay, okay. So let's try to move towards like some solutions because I love the group that first of all, with the group that you're starting, is it sort of are you proposing sort of like a meetup group kind of scenario where people like I live here and kind of finding
In
other young
person.
moms?
In person. So what we're trying to
Okay.
do is we're trying to rally on the boots on the ground. We're trying to rally grassroots leaders, peer
Okay.
leaders, a mother who says, I want to be a leader. And we
Okay.
educate that mother how to lead that play group, community organizer, and to get play groups that go from home to home.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
in the same home. You alternate homes.
Yes.
And you're doing play groups in women's homes, or men if the father is. There are some
Yeah.
fathers. I do groups, probably 1 out of 10 are fathers who are raising their children. So the idea is that that primary attachment figure has to be present at those play groups, because what you're trying to do, you can't send a babysitter, and you can't skip too many times. I mean, if you're sick, you're sick. But the idea is you're forming a community,
Yeah.
community
Yeah.
which is what's missing. Because when
Yeah.
women don't have community, they're dying to go back to work sooner, because it was like you wanting to go to the mall. They're
Yeah.
isolated. So
Yeah.
this is a way to solve for community. Playgroups where you don't leave your baby behind, you bring your babies to the playgroups, and they're Montessori like playgroups where you have multiple ages playing with each other, but the mothers are then there to talk about breastfeeding and separation and
Yeah.
sleep and discipline and my
Yeah.
child isn't eating, and what are you feeding your child, and what's your pediatrician telling you? Well, this is what my pediatrician's telling me, and
Yeah.
I'm so tired, and me too, I'm tired too, and this is really hard. Yes, it's really hard. This is what women had. They were admired by society for caring for their children first and foremost,
Yeah.
and they were admired and supported by one another.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've lost this.
Yeah. Well, like I think what you're speaking towards there too, which we cannot forget, is like the self-love that's necessary for a mother in order to give good love, right? You know?
Self love comes from the relationship she had with her own mother. And what we have now is multi generational trauma, because there are so many mothers who say, I can't stand mothering. Let me send my child to daycare. I'm going to send, they don't do that consciously, but they'll be like, somebody can raise my child better than me.
Mm.
And they literally leave their children behind. If you do that, so these children who develop attachment disorders, it's carried on generationally. There was an experiment by Michael Meany. He did experiments on animals, but we're mammals. And the idea is that rats who licked and groomed their young produced mothers who then licked and groomed their young. But those that didn't lick and groom their young didn't pass that down generationally. It's not genetic. It's called the inheritance of acquired characteristics. What he also found is that the mothers who licked and groomed their young, those young were more resilient to stress going forward than the ones who weren't licked and groomed by their mothers.
Which brings me up, like, I mean, because before I became a psychotherapist, I was a speech language pathologist, and I did work in our northern communities, which is the indigenous of Canada. And because I was researching speech development, language development, and what I noticed, and I'm trying to think about cultural, like how cultural influences are, but in those indigenous communities, the child was not given a whole lot of attention. I'm just going to put that, like I was interviewing the parents, and that child would sit in a little basket or whatever, not a peep. Like, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what a well-trained child or whatever, right? But I think, not
Child with
only,
an attachment disorder. Again, remember,
well,
those indigenous communities have been affected by our culture. We've changed those indigenous communities. They don't raise their children in the same ways culturally that they used to,
but
because, yeah.
But how do we know that though? Like, because what I see also is that the child, it was very common for the grandparent to care, almost even more so being the primary caregiver than the actual
So
mother.
that's called alloparenting, and alloparenting is when other family members help with the care of the child, but when the baby is in distress, the mother is proximate to the child to soothe the baby in distress. So
Okay.
when the baby is happy, the baby can go to the grandmother. But in those communities, the grandmother is not at all possessive or in
No.
competition the mother over the distress of the child. The grandmother brings the baby to the mother,
Yeah.
supports the mother to be the best mother. So
Mm.
that's alloparenting. Alloparenting is not leaving your child for 10 hours a day in daycare with strangers. That's not alloparenting.
No.
Nor is it leaving your child 10 hours a day with a babysitter. That's not alloparenting. Alloparenting in indigenous communities is when the baby is happy, the baby is entertained by and cared for by other loving family members, extended family members.
Mm.
When the baby is in distress, that baby is within earshot or eyeshot of that mother.
Okay. So in the support communities that you're creating here, are you going to recognize the different like culture, because we do come from so much multicultural, like, will you try to
Well, remember, I'm not organizing them. We're
Right.
getting community organizers to
Yeah.
organize in their communities. The assumption is that within that community, they're organizing their own communities.
Okay.
It's not us organizing those communities for them. It's facilitating women to find other women. Call
Okay.
it mothers to mothers.
Yeah, mothers reaching out to other mothers. I know you have to leave soon, I'm guessing, right? And
Yeah.
but like if we could just maybe like review some of the solutions. One of them is what you're proposing right now, which I think is wonderful. Another one I think would be what we touched on briefly was simplifying our lives and not like, moving away from this capitalistic sort of
Yes.
society that very
That
unfortunate.
prioritizes materialism.
Yeah, exactly. And because we don't want these women, 50, 60, and 70 kind of looking back with all their wealth and materialistic goods and feel sad about, yeah, their children. Okay, and the loss of that time. What do you think about like I have a lot of 40-year-old women that are just trying to do their best and like one of them I know has to drive 45 minutes to drop her child off at a daycare because daycare openings are very slim, even though, yeah. So, I mean, there's so many different layers of
Well, maybe
difficulty.
she'll hear this and not want to drop her child off in daycare.
Well,
That
yes,
would.
yes, and yes, give up an income. Maybe it's not going to be two income households anymore. I guess that's something for the couple
At
to
least,
discuss.
at least not depend so heartily on a woman's income. It doesn't mean a woman can't earn some money, but
Mhm.
maybe not putting her in the position of feeling so stressed and pressured about bringing in money while she's, because that's, remember, raising children is a full-time job. And so what we've done is we've stressed out women, right?
Yeah,
Because we've told them that you can raise healthy children, which is a full-time job, and also have a full-time job
yeah, yeah,
outside the home.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and that really has put women in a position of, I mean, think about the mind body connection. More women suffer from postpartum depression, anxiety, are getting breast cancer, uterine cancer, all kinds of things
Oh,
that are the
yeah,
mind body connection is
yeah.
that we have put women into an untenable position. When we stopped admiring women for their mothering, we put them in the position of saying, we don't admire you unless you go out into the workforce. And that was wrong.
You're very right. I mean, even the women's menstrual cycle. I mean, we are delicate. We're extremely delicate
Are
beings.
indeed. We are indeed. The balance can shift at any moment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I know. I see. Like, no wonder there's a fertility crisis
Absolutely,
going
because
on.
fertility is compounded, infertility is compounded by stress.
Yes, absolutely. And autoimmune diseases, on the rise.
Autoimmune,
Yeah.
cancer on the rise. So one would say we're not going in a direction that is pro-human. We're
No.
going in a direction that is pro-economic success, pro-achievement in careers, pro-materialism, but we are not going in a direction that is pro-human.
No.
Not at all.
No, I agree with you very much. But like maybe to give some women like hope too. Like I mean, even when I think about my client driving her daughter, that distance every single day, she's either singing like a song with her or they're playing, I Spy My Little Eye, like I just want to remind women that there is a lot you can do with that burdening time or the small amount of time. It's sort of like put the frickin' device away. Like if you are at a park or you're pushing that baby on a stroller or whatever that
Well,
is.
well, I can end it by saying that
Okay,
you can be physically present and be emotionally checked out.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I'm going to say you can't be emotionally present if you're not physically present. And that's the
Yes.
harsh,
Yeah.
inconvenient truth.
The inconvenient truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm stealing Al Gore's term.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, I could have spent another hour talking to you, but like I think we covered quite a bit in the little time
We
we had.
did.
So I really appreciate it, Erica, and good luck with everything you're doing. And thank you for doing everything you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, take care, everyone. We'll
You
see you next week. Bye-bye. Hey, sorry for the brief interruption, but as I was speaking with Erica, I realized there's so much more that I want to expand on. So what I did is I recorded some of my own thoughts, and you'll find that at the end of the show. So let's continue. So, if any of you have struggled with parenting and specifically work-life balance, I should really have stated it that way. If any of you have struggled with work-life balance, um, you know, especially a woman, because most women are working, and most women, at least in Canada, take at least 6 months or a year off of from their work in order to be with their babies. I guess we're sort of privileged because in the States, it's actually zero time, as I learned today, which is crazy. But even a year's time, I think a lot of women really struggle with going back, um, because you're gonna feel guilt in all ways, right? You're either gonna feel guilty that you're away from work when you're home with your child, or you're going to feel guilty when you're at home because you're away from work. Maybe for some women, work is not really where their heart lies. It's not a true passion or vocation, and therefore you're more than happy staying home raising your children, which is wonderful. But then there's other women who, I think they've sort of put a lot of their heart and soul and money. Let's face it, education is not cheap. And I mean, your bachelor's degree nowadays is minimum. I think most Cations are now asking, if not a master's, then, a practicum or something like that. And we're also living in a very capitalistic society. That's something that Eric and I also touched on today, where you're almost expected to have a two-income household, right? Just to, as you say, make ends meet. But I think, this is one of the problems is that we've moved away from a very simple lifestyle that prioritizes family and relationships, and minimalism and community. We've sort of put that all aside, and we've chosen to, yeah, like all the things that are meaningless in life, all the materialistic things, all the pride, the honor of owning things. But that's not to say that, and that we talk about this, it's not to say that if you're a woman who is passionate about your career, it's not to say that you can't have both. I think what Erica is saying, just delay that passion till a little bit later in life, because we are living longer lives if we take care of ourselves, right? But I mean, easier said than done, because often it's in our most fertile years that we're told like we need to grind it and work and work up the corporate ladder. If you don't do it in the early years, you're going to have missed an opportunity. But this is, again, what I said, these are also our most fertile years. So if you want to have children, you're going to need to make a choice. And although we didn't touch on it, I too deeply, we didn't touch on any of the topics too deeply. And maybe I'll have Erica on here, in the future to kind of like um, hone in on specific topics. But like we all know that the number of children that most couples are having nowadays or it's just dwindling, dwindling, dwindling. And it's not just in North America, it's all over the world. So that's a huge problem. And It's because I think one of the reasons is that women do want it all. We want to have a very fulfilling career, and we want to use the time and money that we placed into our education. We want to be able to use that and, sort of individualize ourselves, or gain some identity rather than maybe just having the identity of a wife or a mother. Now, both those things are extremely honorable roles, but that's not what society is telling us. You're almost kind of like a weirdo if you choose to not work and stay at home with your children. Anyway, there's so many different things that we touched on that can be expanded. And I would love to hear, your comments and or reaching out to either Erica or I, uh, if you want more of an in-depth conversation about it. I love talking about this subject. And I most love talking about solutions. So I mentioned one is just sort of to simplify our lives and realize that just because everybody else is chasing the American dream of owning two properties and having a three-door garage for your multiple cars, and chasing status. I'm a huge fan of the philosopher Thomas Aquinas, and he says, if you're unhappy, chances are you're usually trying to, well, you got your priorities mixed up. That wasn't his language, but he's saying you've fallen into the sin of idolatry. You're idolizing either power, pleasure, honor, or wealth. And if you're doing this, then happiness will be unachievable. In the Christian faith, I mean, they often speak about prioritizing God first and foremost, then your spouse, and then your children. And yes, we talk a lot about children and parenting in this episode, but it is very important, myself as a couples therapist and coach, that parenting is a dual job. It's very, very hard to do alone. And we didn't even get into the reason why both a male presence and a female presence is necessary in parenting. And again, another topic, that I love to talk about, but it's a hard job. And we did speak about it being a complete sacrifice to parent, your children, but also it being such a difficult job. Having you and your partner on the same team is extremely important, and for you both to come out as a united front. And in those moments, to help one another in each other's struggles, because it is going to be a struggle. And there's nothing that hurts more than, you know, you may be failing at providing your child with what they need in the moment. And for your partner to, I don't know, shine light on that, or correct you in front of the child, or whatever it is. Like, we're all going to fail, and we're going to do it in front of our children. Um, but it's so important to stand united in front of your children. And if there's something that you see your partner, a weak area that you're seeing in your partner, a weakness in your partner, regarding, a parenting role that they have, to not say it in front of the child, right? Just to take the child, I mean, later on, without the child's presence there, for you and your partner to discuss how that could be done perhaps differently, and for your partner to sit there and listen and not defend their the reason why they did that. I mean, I just had a session this morning with a woman who spoke exactly about that, how she needed to help her husband with their 19-year-old son in terms of how, she could see from the outside the way he commented to his son was probably not the best way. But she waited for her son to leave before she did that. And that's not even why her and I see each other. But, it was something that she shared. And I just thought, that's so perfect. It's so perfect. And here's an example. She has a wonderful career. So does he. Um, and they're doing a good job, but their child is also struggling with some anxiety. So, in saying that, you and your partner could be doing a great job, and your child is still going to struggle with some mental health issues. That's the other thing that we didn't really say in the episode that I wanted to bring to light is that there are so many reasons right now why children, adolescents, and young adults are struggling with anxiety. It is not just because perhaps the mom is not home in the first 3 years of their lives. And yeah, I think the biggest illness we have right now in society, besides capitalism, is distractibility. And to be attentive, like maybe just if you take anything away from today's episode, how about seeing yourself as you're going to do your best, your very best to be attentive to your child? And that's not just, being present in front of your child in those primary years, those attachment that attachment period from 0 to 3, where you have to act as your child's like a emotional regulator sort of thing and train them with that. Attentiveness is throughout your child's lifetime. So whether it's they're 2 and they tripped and they scrape their knee, attentive to them there, whether it's a 12-year-old that came home from school, your little girl who's been being bullied because she's not pretty enough or thin enough, or your son who, is 19 and doesn't have a freaking clue what to do with his life. And besides that, is also completely, um, feeling like unconfident about even matching up with a girl. It's to the day that your daughter has their own child to, you know, fast forward 15 years down the road when your child and when your grown adult child and her partner are struggling in their marriage. Inattentiveness goes Attentiveness goes a long, long way. So you don't always need to be physically present with them, right? That's like making a priority to reach out to them and making sure they're okay, whether that be a quick text, um, or a phone call or a visit, whatever it might be. But attentiveness in their younger years as well, means putting your phone away and prioritizing your time. The young dads out there, you know, playing less video games and spending more time with your family. The young women out there, the young moms, is again, not jetting off to every conference or girlfriend's weekend or, whatever that might be. Like, honestly, I feel just putting that phone away more after 5 o'clock, after your work is ended, counts for a majority of good parenting or bad parenting, however you look at it. Just like savor those moments. Oh my goodness. There's so much more I can say, and this is such an important topic, okay? A lot of good thought-provoking comments, I guess you could say. And but in the end, like I really, really, really don't want women to feel overly anxious about this. Like the goal here is to bring peace to your lives. The comment that when we spoke about guilt and Erica was saying, you know what, like I think it is good that we might be triggering some guilt in women. That depends because I think if there's a solution, then yeah, maybe it's good, right? But I don't think we can expect a solution overnight. As we said, both of us, we very much agree that simplicity would be a great tactic. But in the meanwhile, let's start by doing what Erica's doing, and I'll link that in the show notes, by the way, if you're interested in that. And I get it. I mean, Erica's in New York. I'm broadcasting this from the middle of Canada, and let's hope the movement continues. But she's starting there. I am more than willing to talk more openly about this in terms of bringing some solutions. And as I mentioned on this episode, I am beginning a support group for female lawyers and male lawyers. I mean, because we need men in the family. We need fathers present in the family. So I'm sure they're also feeling some guilt about their long hours at the office. And we want marriages to stay together. We don't want, husband and wife arguing about these things, right? And we need both spouses to feel supported. So I'm all for it. And the other thing I think that's really, really important here is to see that just because a parent is absent due to work responsibilities, let's just say, it doesn't mean that your child doesn't know that they're loved by you. And I think I can be an example of this because, as I mentioned in other episodes, and I think I referenced here, is that, my parents, my father was an immigrant. My mother was born here in Manitoba, but she started off her married life at 17, and she didn't know any other way of life. And at 85, she still doesn't. Everything she does is for the house, for the family. But my dad, even though he wasn't around very much, except maybe in the winter months, but even then, I mean, any farmer knows right now your winter months are more or less catch-up months in the shop and blah, blah, blah. So I knew my dad loved me deeply. And I can't tell you I can't give you a manual on in terms of how he was able to show that to me, but all I knew is that he loved me very, very deeply. And I never felt like he didn't care or his attention wasn't on me or, yeah. I really do believe a lot can be done with the quality time that we have with our children. So I just wanted to, comment that at the end as well. And also, like, I was reflecting on, my friend group. Now, there's a university core friend group that I have. And when I think back to their careers and mine, it's kind of interesting because I have one of my best friends, my best friend is an engineer. So a very male dominated field. She has four boys and she's, I say a star mom in maybe not so much in the traditional ways, but she's 100% there for her kids. Okay. And then yeah, like there's one in high up in finance, another dear friend of mine. Uh she seems to be able to do it all in a very traditional mom. Um, and there's another friend that's a bank manager. I think if like she's high up there in the banks. Another one of my friends is a lawyer. Now she gave up for a lawyer position, which is very interesting, but she was very involved working in other ways. Anyway, it's interesting to me, like, yeah, there's these women, that were reared in the 80s, for example. I mean, a lot of a lot of them were able to do it. And and I think all of my friends' marriages are none, if any, are divorced. If there are, like, they're sort of distant friends, and but they got great kids, good families. So my point is, like, as scary as, what today's episode might have sounded like, to listen to this, I'm not saying you can do it all, because 100% women, I have a lot of women that are coming to me burnt out. And yes, what we mentioned about, the mind-body connection and the body keeps the score, as Gabor Mate has written about in his books, very much a thing. Very much a thing. Stress is a silent killer. So I'm not saying that, but, like, yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated. A parent being away from the child, let's say the mother being away from the child at the beginning stages of their life, these attachment stages, it very much probably is contributing to some of the anxiety that we have right now. But there's a lot of other things that's contributing to the anxiety. And I think one of them is the nuclear family just breaking down. I mean, no one is together anymore, because they're all attached to their devices. Just simply having dinner together, as a family each evening seems to be a hardship for whatever reason. Having access to all the media out there. I mean, I wasn't scared as a child. I wasn't scared for my health, for what's happening in the world. It's not uncommon for my kids to come to me, my adult children, and say, "Mom, I got a bump here." Or, like, they're becoming kind of hypochondriacs because, well, they have access to all this, like, all these influencers talking about health, and we've all become, overly obsessed with our health conditions. We got to drink green tea, and we got to jump in a frozen bathtub, and we got to meditate, and we got to whatever. It's just sort of, we've got kids, I think, like, so wound up now in terms of what they should be doing, and we have to look a certain way. And then even the wars that are breaking out in the world, like, I mean, like, you don't think your kids are looking at that stuff on social media, and all the fear mongering that's going out there as well. I mean, if that's not causing anxiety in kids, what is, right? And then all the toxins and the pesticides and blah, blah, blah. I mean, we can't contribute our children's attachment disorders on one thing. This episode was just sort of to bring light into one area. And I 100% am behind Erica in the terms of spending more time with your kids, spending more quality time with your kids, because parenting is not an easy job. And but it's also not your right, right? It's a privilege to have children, and we have to stop seeing them as, just another commodity, just like, another car on the driveway. Something to show your status, something to say that you're a parent. I mean, we need to be role models for these kids, right? So it's again one of the most difficult jobs. If you're a young mother out there, hang in there. It will pay off 100%. Easier said than done, but give yourself some grace, get help when you need help, talk to people. And that's what I love about Erica's idea of a community, etc. So I'm sure we're going to be talking about this again, because I can't seem to be shutting my mouth about it. There's so many different directions we can take this. But anyway, I'm glad to see that people are caring more the pendulum swang way too much one way with women's, the feminist movement, Me Too movement. And we do need to come back now into a middle ground. And let's do this together. All right. Thanks for hanging in there. Have a great week. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. Remember that you can watch the full episode on YouTube, where I plan to hang out the most. Your feedback and suggestions for future guests are incredibly valuable to me, so please don't hesitate to post a comment. You are an integral part of this journey.